Sure. Is basically an introduction to allergies. And allergies are interesting because for those of you that don't have allergies and don't have food allergies, it's a no-brainer. You don't even think about it. But for people that have allergies, it can be a completely life-shaping event. I have a grandson on my husband's side of the family, and he's 7 now, and he has a severe peanut allergy. And a couple other nuts affect him. So he's been to the hospital twice. He's 7 now. Everywhere he goes, he's got an EpiPen. He's got an EpiPen in his backpack. If we take care of him, he comes over with EpiPens. We think about where the EpiPen is. We have that conversation every time because it's life or death for him. He can be in a situation where even somebody may touch him with peanuts or pecans. I believe he's had a bad effect with, and he would die without medical intervention. And he has his father's a doctor, and they've done everything they can, and it's not really curable once kids get these severe allergies. So not all allergies are that severe, but they can be, so we need to take this very seriously. So this is the outline for allergies. So I'm going to talk about a couple different terms. There's food allergy and food sensitivity or intolerance. I want you to know the difference between those. And then also, how common are they? And then what makes an allergy happen? And then what do we do about it? And what are the actual guidelines now? So this is how we're going to move forward with this. Okay, so there are two terms or two sets of categories that we're going to talk about a lot here. One is a food allergy, and the other one is food. Every time I touch my mouse, it jumps. Okay, food allergy, and then so this is the food allergy, and this is the side about food sensitivity and intolerance, and these are two different things. So some people may have an allergy to a food or also an intolerance to it. So sometimes they overlap a little bit. But they're two clearly different conditions. So the purpose here is to be clear about how they are different. So let's start out with food allergy, and then we'll move over here. A food allergy, notice the thing here, it says IgE mediated. This is Ig stands for immunoglobulin. Kristen, you want to type that in the chat? Immunoglobulin. Okay, so this is a molecule a protein molecule in the body that mediates the reaction to the food. So the true food allergy is mediated by this particular kind of immunoglobulin or antibody. Food intolerance is not mediated in the same way. So these are two different reactions to foods. One is life-threatening, or can be, and one is annoying, okay, and just may cause discomfort. So we're going to be clear about these two things. So a true food allergy has an IgE or immunoglobulin E reaction. So those antibodies are in the blood. And when someone is having an allergic reaction, it occurs within 2 hours. Okay, so if I'm going to I eat a peanut and I have a peanut allergy, within 2 hours, I'm going to have my response. It's not the next day or 6 hours later. And the symptoms can be, hives or itching, all this kind of stuff, all the way up to anaphylactic shock. So there's a range of symptoms. We'll go over this some more. Food intolerance is not mediated by IgE. And so it's a different reaction. Let's talk about, because some of these you're going to be familiar with. No IgE antibodies, but can you think of a food intolerance you've learned about previously? Is there anything that people are intolerant of?
Lactose intolerance. Perfect.
Lactose intolerance, right? So lactose intolerance is you may not have the enzyme enough of an enzyme to break down lactose into glucose and galactose. Lactose intolerance is not an allergy, it's an intolerance. you can have, in contrast, an allergic reaction to proteins in milk, not the lactose, but proteins. That could actually be a food allergy. People are sometimes, parents can be confused between the two. If their kid can't consume milk, it could be for one of these two reasons. One, they just don't have enough lactase and they're uncomfortable. You know, they get bloated and whatever after they have milk. Another one is they have a strong reaction. It can be a range of symptoms. Sometimes they're serious. Okay, so these are the major two categories. Okay, so let's talk about the food intolerance sensitivity first. And I have a very small amount of information here. Because the bulk of this is going to be on food allergies. So this is our slide on food intolerance and sensitivity. We don't always know. Somebody may say, you know, whenever I eat a potato, I get a headache. And they feel like that happens enough to where they're having a intolerance to this. And we can't always say, oh, well, this is a mechanism that's going on. We just have to recognize that they may have an intolerance to food for whatever reason, and then they should avoid those foods, right? So that's an intolerance or sensitivity. So they may have, like, just like you mentioned, it could be a lactose intolerance, so they don't have the enzyme lactase or enough of it. So that could be one thing. Some people react to compounds in cheese and gives them headaches. Other people react to caffeine and coffee, tea or chocolate, and they feel uncomfortable. That's an intolerance or sensitivity, but it's not an allergic reaction. You can also get rashes and things like that from foods, but this is a different mechanism than a true allergy. So, but look here, here's a list of items that people often have sensitivity about. And these are this is very close to the same list for people that have food allergies. Sometimes people don't know, do I have a food allergy? Does my kid have a food allergy or an intolerance? So this is where sometimes testing needs to happen to find out, you know, get pediatrician input to find out what the cause is.
Somebody asked if bloating is a sign of intolerance.
Yeah, it absolutely. So if you look back at this one, food and often just gastrointestinal symptoms. So if you think about lactose intolerance, often it's, you know, diarrhea and bloating and discomfort. You know, it's serious for people that are experiencing it, but it's not life-threatening. But yeah, that's one example.
There was another question. So if people have repeated sensitivities to a food, is it something worth mentioning to the doctor to have recorded on their chart since it's not a full allergy?
There's no reason not to, but a doctor's just going to say, don't eat that. This is basically what it would say. If you notice it's problematic enough, you know, don't worry about it. But it doesn't hurt to bring it up. But the serious stuff is the allergies, right? Life-threatening. So, but learning about intolerances, this is where dietitians can really help people figure out what you can eat. Okay, and so not everybody has the rich background in nutrition that you guys have. Okay, so food allergy. The definition is an adverse health effect from a specific immune response that's reproducible. So if you're allergic to peanuts, every time you eat the peanuts, you have either the same reaction or it's worse. You don't skip reactions sometimes. If you're not allergic to peanuts, let's say your first peanuts and you throw up, or a second time, and then a week later you eat peanuts and you don't throw up or you don't have a strong immune response, you're not really allergic to the peanuts. An allergy is reproducible. This is how they can test to see if it's serious. So anyway, that's not even that funny of a cartoon, but I was just looking for one. But anyway, okay. Here's the common food allergies. All 8 of these are required to be included in a separate list on a food label, sorry. So if you look at the label, for those people who have allergies, that part of the label is a very big deal. And so just to talk about what a big deal it is. So back to my 7-year-old grandson, he can't go into any child care facility where any kid in the room brought nuts in their lunchbox. He could even get triggered if somebody had it for breakfast. Less likely, but the sensitivity can be so great. So obviously we hang out. So his parents have a very long list. If they eat at a restaurant, they have a very long list of what's here, tell me what's in this food exactly. Are you sure? They're not a long list, but they're very careful about making sure that the allergens that he is exposed to aren't that serious, and they take the EpiPen with them everywhere. So if there's peanuts in the food, they need to know. And they may, we've gone to eat at a Clay Pit in Austin, an Indian food restaurant. And if you want a dish with cashews in it, you don't want to sit by them because the cashew fumes or me drop it on his plate or something that goes by. So basically when we go out to eat with these guys, we all follow the diet to make sure that nothing gets in his way that could cause this. So it's very serious.
I have a question. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, don't apologize.
So will it be that serious as even when they get older, like adulthood?
Okay. Some of these we outgrow, and I'll go through this a little bit. Some allergies people outgrow, but the peanut allergy, we haven't figured out how to get people past that. There's some treatments now where they give people little minuscule amounts and see if they can, like in little tablets, and he's been through this protocol where we get a little bit more and see what they can tolerate, just so that it's not such a life and death thing when they die, but he won't get better. So the common allergens, milk, this is real common, eggs, kids may do okay. It's not that many kids, and when it's cooked, it may be okay. Maybe the raw egg will do it. Peanuts, this is the most serious one in terms of, anaphylactic shock, okay. Anaphylactic reactions. And then tree nuts, being more of that. Soy, a lot of times if kids have a cow milk allergy, they also have a soy milk allergy. So it's interesting, so they pretty much overlap. Wheat can be a problem with some kids. Fish, and then shellfish. This is considered to be one of the more dangerous ones. It's pretty rare. But so these are the 8 most common allergens. Now, remember the rules. If you have an allergy, you need to look at these food labels. So the 8 allergens are supposed to be on here, and oftentimes they say may contain. That's because if it's a plant that manufactures a variety of foods, if peanuts or any of these other products are in the plant itself, they have to state that, because there could be cross-contamination. So let's say you're buying some kind of granola, right? And you get a granola that you don't want any nuts in or anything. They have to make sure they don't make that granola in a place where some of the granola has nuts in it. So the label needs to indicate if it's safe or not. Okay, so how common are food allergies? Here's some numbers for you. A lot of people have food allergies. People go to the ER for food allergies. I'm not going to ask you these numbers. I just want you to have an idea here. And this is kind of interesting here. We're going to bring this back full circle. But we've actually seen an increase in peanut allergies between 1997 and 2011. Now, what happened here is we saw, and I'm going to talk about this again, but we started noticing that kids were having severe reactions to peanuts. So then we removed peanuts from schools and child care centers and tried to, and told parents not to offer these products while they were little, because it made sense. Well, it turns out that was exactly the wrong thing to do. It turns out that early, as we'll talk about this, early exposure is better than late exposure. So we'll talk about it. So we had a period of time here where we were following the wrong guidelines, keeping peanuts away from families, and actually making the problem worse. Okay, so food allergies are important to people, especially when they experience them. Okay, let's go back. You remember I talked about immunoglobulin E? And I said, food sensitivity does not involve this particular antibody. However, food allergies do. So if someone has a true food allergy, then that allergy is mediated by a class of protein called IgE, class of antibodies. Okay. And immunoglobulin E is an antibody produced by the immune system. The overproduction is what causes the allergy. And so we know that's true, but what's interesting is we don't have this reaction the first time we're exposed. So for example, I'm a 8-month-old kid, I've never had peanuts. My first bite of peanuts, peanut butter, I may not have a reaction, whether or not I'm developing an allergy or not. But the next time I have them, if I'm developing an allergy, the second exposure can trigger the immunoglobulin E, and the kid's been sensitized, and the next exposure can be very serious. Okay, I'm going to give us a 2-minute break here. And so just pause for a second, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I need some more water. I apologize. I'm having a little bit of nausea, so I'm holding on here, but I apologize. Okay, so anyway, so the first exposure may not cause a reaction. So if they have their first exposure to peanuts, you don't know yet. And then their second one, though, they're kind of, what they're doing is preloading their immune system. So they have these immunoglobulin E's. So if this is a peanut protein, and this is a cell of the immune system called the mast cell, what it does is produces inflammatory compounds. So this is how we manage reactions. So if we have IgE produced, first time we had peanuts, we made a bunch of these. The second time we eat peanuts, then these are here and they help the antigen, the peanut protein, bind to the cell, and then we get the secretion of all these chemicals that is what mediates the reaction. Okay, so IgE mediated means there's an antibody that's involved in presenting that antigen to a cell that produces things. An example of what the cell might do is produce histamine. Histamine is something that causes, your nose to run and some swelling to occur and some discomfort, right? And so, that's produced by these cells of the immune system. Okay, so I just mentioned this earlier, but people have to be sensitized before they actually have these reactions. Your first exposure to peanuts won't do it, your second one will. So sensitization precedes development. Food allergens, then the term here is antigen. You'll see this. An allergen is an antigen, is absorbed through the intestinal lining. The body, this is part of sensitization. The body creates an immune response. They make IgEs, okay, particular antibodies, so IgEs, and they are sensitized. And then the IgEs are there, and the next time the person is exposed to peanuts or the antigen, then the IgE causes that reaction to occur and it makes people sick. Okay, this is probably more detail than I want to go into during class, but I put it here for you to take a look at if you would like to do that. Here's a simpler reaction. So here's an antigen such as your peanut allergy, or peanut molecules, sorry. And so your exposure to peanuts causes certain cells to make immunoglobulin E, just like the slide we looked at before. These guys interact with these cells like a mast cell. Here's your peanut protein. It binds IgE, and that causes your cells to overreact and produce compounds that make you uncomfortable, like too much histamine. Okay, while we're doing this, we can create, while we're just having this first exposure, we're also setting the body up to remember what this antigen is like. Okay, I think this is a helpful example. Anybody here allergic to ragweed? It's that time of year.
Yes.
Okay, you know if you are generally because you hate September. Okay, so here's an example. The first time a person runs across an allergen such as ragweed, here you go. She makes large amounts of the IgE antibody. They bind to the mast cell. The second time they have a brush with ragweed, the cell is ready to go and it produces all those histamines. And that's what makes the nose stuffy and the sneezing happen and all that kind of stuff. So this is the same kind of thing that happens with food. It's just easier to understand with ragweed. Okay, so we're going to start. Yeah.
So, and I don't know if we'll end up covering this in a later slide, but it's something that I thought of. But so I think I understand as far as the intolerance. You know, I know I understand the difference between the intolerance and then the actual allergy. But in my personal life, I've experienced the acquisition of lactose intolerance. You know, from me being vegan.
Yeah.
My first accidental run-in with dairy after 2 years resulted in, something rather, uncomfortable to not go into detail. So I know that intolerances can be something that is acquired, over time from either abstaining from something or even possibly having too much of something. But does food allergy work that same way where it's like, you're not born with it, but just through randomness or through something that your body does, you acquire a food allergy later in life?
Yeah, you can. You can acquire it. You're never going to have it unless you're exposed to something. But an example of acquiring it is a baker. A baker may work in a bakery for 10 years, no problem with eggs. But at some point, that overexposure to eggs, because they use egg whites to paint on the top of the bakery and make it being all shiny and all this kind of stuff, and you cook with it. After a while, they can develop a severe egg allergy because of time. But usually it's these first couple of